So, Dave, tell me a little bit about your mantra when it comes to wine. I have it here, but I'd rather hear it directly from you, so I don't butcher it up.
Well, I think that number one, wine should be something that should be enjoyed. And I think people become intimidated because they think they have to know a lot about it in order to enjoy it, which isn't true. And I jot down here that a book that I really liked was called Plain Talk About Fine Wine. And it was written by a gentleman by the name of Justin Meyer. He just passed away a couple years ago.
Okay.
He was from Silver Oak Winery. Maybe some of the viewers or listeners have heard of that, in the Alexander Valley in California, Northern California, Cabernet wines. And he said that, you don't have to know anything about wine to enjoy it. And I think sometimes people forget that because they start thinking like, I have to drink this wine or I have to know this about it to enjoy it. No, it's what's in the glass. Do you like it? Do you enjoy it? Fundamentally, never forget that. And I always try to remind people that if you learn something about it, it can help your appreciation.
Okay.
And to me, that's a pleasure for me. To appreciate it is to require some knowledge.
So there's no rules.
No. I mean, the only rule is you should enjoy it. Don't drink something you don't like. And don't have anyone tell you that you should like this one or that one. It's all about you having your opinion, having confidence in your opinion, like music.
Sure.
I mean, you have an opinion about music, and you should have an opinion about wine. And fundamentally, it's based on the sensation, what you experience, but also if you learn and read about it, that can help inform your opinion as well and broaden your horizons a little bit. So to me, that's one of the pleasures that I like too. I also, Eric, I was thinking of that movie Sideways. I don't know if you remember.
I do remember that movie.
And one
the
of
little
my
short actor, what was his name? I love him.
His name is Paul Giamatti.
That's it. Yep.
And Virginia Madsen played Maya. He played Miles.
Okay.
And you'll recall he's kind of a schlubby guy and not very confident. He's divorced. He's trying to write a novel.
Right.
And the character who's very confident, played by Tom Hayden, is having a little moment with his girlfriend. And here's Maya and Miles, and they're kind of looking at each other, and she asks him, what's your favorite wine? And he talks, that would be Pinot Noir, because I think, how complicated it is and how much care it takes to make a great wine. He goes on and on and on. He says, well, how about you? And she says, well, I kind of like to think about what was going on when the grapes were harvested and who are the people that are harvesting those grapes. And, some of them are with us, some of them are no longer with us. And then she says, she lays it on him. She says, and it tastes so fucking good. And then she puts her hand on his hand, making a gesture, and he kind of pulls back. But to me, that's sort of what wine is. It's about the emotion. It's about the pleasure. It's about enjoying it and not the pretense. And Miles, kind of had a lot of knowledge, but he was afraid of what it made him feel and how he enjoyed it. So
that was the essence of the movie. Was
absolutely
was breaking through to him.
And him allowing himself to not be threatened by that, and actually at the end, the last scene, knocking on the door, you don't know what happens. It's kind of an ambiguous ending, but it was a good ending. That was a cute movie.
I thought it was a great movie too. Why do you think wine is so misunderstood?
Again, it goes back to the intimidation factor, I think.
Why though? Why is there intimidation?
Well, I've heard it said that choosing wine at a restaurant is the second biggest fear right after public speaking. Because I think it's that people don't want to be perceived as not knowing something. That it's just a lack of confidence and feeling that if they don't choose a wine, or if they don't know something about it. I imagine music can be the same way, although
to a lesser degree.
To a lesser degree, because people, I think, kind of can embrace music and they either like it or they don't. Classical, rock and roll, blues, all those things. It's not as intimidating. People seem to have more readily opinions about music than they do about wine. I think they think that with wine you have to have knowledge. It helps to have knowledge, but you don't have to have knowledge. It goes back to that fundamental point,
Okay.
I mean, the second point I wanted to make here, and I just jotted down some things about people who influenced me, because people always ask me, how did you get into wine?
That was my next question.
So, I mean, I'm half Italian on my dad's side, and on my mom's side, they were French and Belgian. Okay, and
how could you not be?
Well, on the mother's side with the French and the Belgian, they were more into beer and that sort of thing. Although I got a big influence there because my grandfather he spoke French, because his father was from Belgium, his mother was from Paris. So for me, that was a big thing. It still is French culture and speaking French. But on the other side, I had an aunt, Aunt Frances, God rest her soul. She was born in 1900. It was always easy to know how old she was, exactly. And she passed away in 93. But when I was a little kid, we used to go over to her house as my father's sister, and she was a home winemaker.
Okay.
And, she said this saying, which at the time, I didn't know what to make of it, but she always said, I make my wines with serendipity.
Yeah, I read that.
And I at the time I was thinking, like, what did that mean? And in the dictionary it says serendipity, the occurrence and development of events by chance in a happy or beneficial way. And that's sort of how she made wine. And as I fast forward to visiting wineries around the world and meeting many winemakers, the best winemakers have that attitude where they're not trying to control necessarily, at least in my opinion, every single process involved in making the wine. They kind of they have the grapes, they let it become what it wants to become, and they do the work in the vineyard, and then let the wine become what it becomes, because every vintage is a little bit different from the last one.
Sure.
And that was her. Now she when I look back on Aunt Frances, she told me that, and she said a lot of things about experimenting, and she was very practical, and I used to love going over there every Sunday, and she'd pour her wine, and I remember thinking to myself as a kid, man, this wine isn't very good, because it seems very oxidized. And I didn't know it at the time. Then as I got older, I realized it wasn't any good, because like many home winemakers, she did not really have the necessary, sanitation, and she'd let the air get in the barrel and the wine and oxidize. But it didn't matter, because she had the right attitude about sharing it, about enjoying it, having it with food, and that always stuck with me. So that really planted the seed, kind of sunk the harpoon in me as a little kid. That wine, it just seemed natural to be at meals, and I remember her saying that about the serendipity, and it wasn't until later, after I've met a lot of winemakers, that I really realized that she was on to something, unpretentious and honest. And she also used to say, this is kind of funny, somebody asked her one time, hey, Aunt Frances, what kind of grapes did you use to make this wine? And she said, what grapes? She said she'd ferment anything. And she said, I have one rule about how when I make wine, I got to get my materials for free. She was a card. She was about 5 foot high, I still remember her. She was a lot of fun. Very very salty sense of humor.
So it was more about the gathering and how it was going to be enjoyed ultimately, and bringing family and friends together.
Getting back to that first point again, Eric, about enjoyment. It all goes back to that. If you're not enjoying it, what's the point? I see people at wine tastings. They're like, "Are you really enjoying this? Why are you doing this if you aren't enjoying it?"
Right.
So that was something that sort of went on to me and stuck with me. And then, like a lot of people, I went off to college, and I was a beer drinker in college. I drank some wine, but I didn't really know too much about it or drink a lot of it, although I did go to a couple places. I remember a French restaurant near the campus, and I really liked that one. It was called Chez Jean. It was in Cambridge, Massachusetts. Long gone, but it I had a lot of fun meals there with friends. And, and so then after I got out of school, I decided, and I'm not exactly sure why I did this, maybe a lack of imagination, I went to law school. So
we won't hold that against you.
No. And I started practicing law for a while, and really wasn't very happy with that profession. Like a lot of lawyers, it was a lot different from what I thought it might be. But I started going to restaurants with clients or what have you, and I was that person who was intimidated by the wine list. I didn't know anything about it, and I knew what I liked, but so I decided to learn something about it. Okay. And after a while, I went to work for a company, Westinghouse. A lot of people worked at Westinghouse. I was in the law department, and the division where I worked was sold, and I took a severance deal and left. And I said to myself, "What am I going to do now?" Another thing that I always liked to do was write, and I said, I like to write. I like wine. I want to learn about wine. Why don't I start a wine publication? Which I did. Right. I published a wine journal. It was a pocket journal. Hired some people here who knew about it, and I just sort of took a deep dive into learning about wine. Right. And I met a lot of people, a lot of mentors, and that got me going. And because I did that, I eventually was able to start writing initially for the Post-Gazette for about 5 years, and then for the last, almost 20 years now, the Tribune Review. Trib. And I do other various writing things, but that I met some real characters along the way, and
I bet
one of the guys that I met was a fellow by the name of Al Long, and I joined the American Wine Society. And I encourage anybody who's listening to this, if you want to learn really about wine, in the American Wine Society, it's basically a lot of home winemakers, and if you make wine, you really learn what it's like to do it, and Al Long had been a president of the American Wine Society, and he ended up, like me, he had a corporate career, but he left that, and he started doing wine festivals, including one out at Seven Springs, and he's now retired, but he said something to me one time. We were talking about, some fancy wines that he had tried and all that stuff. And he said, Dave, he said, no wine has any value until you pull the cork and share it. So, you could look at a bottle of wine that's a $500 bottle of wine. Is that really what it's worth? It might be if you're just doing it on an investment basis. But the true value of any bottle of wine is when you pull the cork and share it, because then it becomes an experience. Right. So that's a good
like no other alcohol, I would say. Wine has that better than any other alcohol, to me. Whether it's beer, whether it's beer or whether it's bourbon, gin, nothing shares in a way like wine does.
Well, I mean, I think there's a lot of things that you can share about. I really love bourbons and scotches, but the nice thing about wine is generally it's something to be meant with food, and you're usually having it over a meal and sharing it that way. Which whereas a cocktail, you're maybe having it before or after, or with a cigar or something like that.
Nothing wrong with that either.
But I think maybe without further ado, we should open it.
You're not going to get any argument out of me,
because this goes into my next point, which is don't judge a wine by its package or closure. Okay, a lot of people say like a wine with a screw cap can't be good, or a wine in a box can't be good, or a wine in a can can't be good.
I've seen them in cans.
I just wrote about those. It's that's one of the hottest areas is canned wine, with a snap top, and just pour it out. And it's really the quality that's in the package. And there's, the box wines, bag and box are becoming pretty good. And screw caps have really become pretty darn good because, because when you have a cork, there's a risk that there could be a taint on the cork. The way they treat the corks with chemicals can sometimes leach into the wine. Whereas with a screw cap, they do treat it, but it's very, very rare that you have a tainted wine with the screw cap. So, in fact, corked wines, statistically, it was something like 1 in 12 bottles. So one bottle out of a case usually is adulterated. Not everyone, you can notice it, the corky smell. It's kind of like they say, like a hairy dog, or like wet cardboard, something nasty. But it's a crazy business that you could put out 1 in 12 pieces, units of your product in it, and it's bad, and people accept that. So, you know, that's why with screw caps you have to change your equipment to do it.
Right.
You know, but let me open this one up. So, no, I haven't tried these. And as we said off the...
First for you, too.
Yeah, you know, I thought it would be fun for you and I to try these to see whether we like them. I picked this one because it's a Gruner Veltliner.
Okay.
Which sounds Germanic because it's from Austria. It's a white wine grape. And this is a grape where they drink a lot of it in these little kind of taverns on the Danube River. And it's just meant for enjoyment. You can see it's a little bit bigger bottle. It's as opposed to a regular 750 milliliter. This is a whole liter.
Okay.
And there's some good values here. So let me take the cap off here. Hear that crack?
I did.
Has the Austrian flag.
I see that.
Kind of cool, you know. So pour some of that. That's pretty good. Hand that over to you.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, you're welcome. I'll pour a little bit of that.
I'm not sure I know what I'm smelling for, but I have to obligatory do that.
Cheers. Good health.
Cheers.
Salute. Chin chin, as they say in Italy. 100 years, you know, to 100 years. Yeah, now this one, they say with Gruner Veltliner, which I love saying that, you know, Gruner Veltliner.
Sounds like a movie.
Gruner, they call it Gruner, yeah. And a Trocken, which means dry, and you got the vintage on it. But this is one that you smell a lot of citrus, but also white pepper. So
white pepper.
Yeah, you can smell a little bit of that. Mainly it's citrus, I think.
That's good.
Nice, huh?
That's good.
Just easy to drink.
Smooth.
Yeah, and has that on the finish acidity. You know, everything about a good wine should be about balance.
Okay.
You know, to me. I mean, the fact of the matter is, most wines sold in Pennsylvania are sweet wines. You know, people would tend to have a sweeter palate from the Pennsylvania wineries, but that's not the case necessarily, you know, in California or in European. They have more of a tradition of dry wines, which for me, I think goes better with food because if it's sweet, it can overpower everything. So, you know, I know you basically have sweetness, you have acidity, which is the freshness, and then you have tannins, which comes from the skins and that sort of thing. Those should all be in balance. And, you know, this wine, I think now most winemakers, you know, aspire to do that, and when you're making a table wine. So I think this one has that.
My first time ever drinking wine as a child, I was given extremely dry wine. I can even remember the brand. I want to say it was table wine. It was Bolla.
Okay, from Italy.
Valpolicella.
Valpolicella.
Or Valpolicella.
Yeah.
And imagine being 16 years old and 15 years old and being actually given that by your family, and your first taste of, well, something that wasn't snuck, of course.
Right.
I remember it finishing so dry. So dry. And that really kind of scarred me from wine for a while.
Turned me off a little bit
from it. Yeah, it was extra. They call that extra dry, or what do they? How do they describe it?
No, I think that's just dry. I mean, yeah, I bet if you tried it now, it probably wouldn't seem as dry.
Probably not. It's been a long time since I had that.
When you're a kid, you know, I know my kids always used to say to me, you know, because they saw wine all the time when they were growing up, and they were like, "Dad, you know, they all taste the same to us. You know, they're too too stringent. You know, they're yucky. They didn't like them. You know, but now they change. You know, your tastes change because, you know, with that wine, I know that wine in general, Valpolicella's, they're supposed to be fruity, and they're less tannic than most other red wines. Interestingly enough,
what does that mean in terms of the palate? Or
tannin? Tannic is the thing when you have skins and you have stems. They have certain compounds, molecular compounds, which just create basically a dry. It's almost like a tea bag. You know how tea gets that? That's tannins. It's the same thing, and it can in certain wines. If they ferment it on the skins, which you have to get a red wine, actually all grape juice is clear. And the only way a red wine becomes a red wine is if it sits on its skins. and that's how it becomes red.
Fascinating.
Yeah, well, that's true, and depending upon how long you let it sit on the skins, it can create more tannins.
Okay.
And some
Makes
wines are meant to be more tannic because that's just the tradition, or you might be eating them with steaks or something like that. You know, so that's what tannin is, and there are some tricks now that wines that are produced on kind of a big industrial scale, they can diminish those tannins because that actually appeals. But for me, wines that I personally like are more from smaller producers, because that's another part as a writer. I'm more interested in the story of the wines that are who's making the wines, because you go to a winery which has tanks that are 50 feet high, and I mean some of them are just literally industrial fields of tanks. I mean, that's pretty boring, and that's more like an industrial process as opposed to growing the grapes yourself, bringing them to the winery. And like I was talking about with my aunt, even though she didn't make good wine, she had the right idea of letting what you're getting from nature become what it wants to become, and not manipulating it to create a product just to sort of sell as many units as you can.
Right.
To me, that's boring. I mean, I'm not saying that those wines aren't potable, because I always go back to drink what you like. I mean, I know a lot of people who, and most of us, I think, have maybe 5 or 10 wines that are your go-to wines, which is understandable. I think it could be more rewarding to try different things and expand in their palate, because to me, I've been drinking wine now and writing about it for all my life practically, and I still discover things all the time, and I've had other Gruner Veltliners, but not from this producer, Lenz Moser, and I like it.
I like it too.
What would you pay for that? It's a whole liter.
It's a whole liter. That's I'd say $25.
$12.99.
Really?
Yeah. See? So for me to write about things like this, it's fun, to let people know. And that's like, I've been writing the column. I used to do it weekly. Can't believe I did this weekly for over 20 years.
Wow.
Oh, yeah, man. That was, I'm paid to do it. I'm happy to do it.
Absolutely.
But, it wasn't like I was getting rich doing it, but
it's passion.
It's a passion.
That's why I'm so glad to have you here. This is, personally, wine's been in my family my whole life, Dave, but I just, and I tried to pretend, especially when I was a younger man, I was out dating, I tried to pretend like I knew what I was talking about. But I think there's an intimidation factor with a lot of younger people when they, 20s and 30s, when they go to a restaurant. You talk about trying to decide what I think we generally know the names and the colors, but what do? We typically look at price. The price, it has to be better because it's expensive.
That's true. I mean, no, that's the perception.
The perception, right?
Which isn't true.
I can imagine it probably. Well, I've tried. I know it's not true because I've been lured in there.
Well, that goes into, man, you're really good, man. Did you read the outline here?
Maybe a little.
One of my all-time favorites from my friend John Eld, who is a wine judge and an educator and one of the guys who wrote for my publication. But he said to me one time that some wines are for people with more money than brains.
Right.
And that's a great saying, because what he was saying is that, there are certain wines that, because maybe they got high ratings in the Wine Spectator or the Wine Advocate or whatever it is, or they have a long tradition. People now, it's crazy, Eric. They're willing to pay anything for those wines. I mean, I know the one that is the most egregious, or not egregious, but the most I guess you might even call it egregious. There's a wine from Burgundy called Domaine de la Romanée-Conti. Okay. And it's a very small vineyard, Pinot Noir, and there's some other vineyards around it, Latache and others, that are very prestigious. So they don't make a lot of it, but people want to buy it, and they'll pay literally $20,000 for a bottle of wine. And some people do it for investment, and then they flip it. Some people buy it so that they can go to a party and put it down and say, look, I mean, anybody who's knowledgeable about wine and sees a Domaine de la Romanie Conti, they're going to,
they'll be impressed.
Pause, maybe be impressed. They're going to want to try it. So people start buying wine to create some reflection of their personality or of who they want people to perceive them to be because they have the wine, which is sick. It's crazy.
It's almost like buying a brand of car or buying a brand of clothing.
Right. In a way, it is exactly like that, because it becomes almost like, it's conspicuous consumption. And I can see, I've seen people who, because they don't want to be perceived as unknowledgeable, they're willing to pay anything to have a bottle of wine and put it down and, and say, look, I brought this. So, it's kind of weird.
Yeah.
It's to me, it's just the opposite. It's like what John Eld said, which is some wines are for people with more money than brains. Because if you're smart, you want to pay the least amount, like you said, $12.99.
Absolutely. That's excellent wine.
Right. Who cares what people think about the wine that you're bringing? You didn't make it, but there's a whole industry in the auction industry that people are willing to pay thousands of dollars for bottles of wine.
Kind of becomes a commodity. People just, it's an investment.
It's an investment, and it gets tied into a business. People use it to promote their business or promote their reputation or somehow, as opposed to just sitting down and enjoying it and sharing it. And my buddy Al Long said, the true value is when you pull the cork and share it.
If I told
or
you,
unscrew the cap.
If I told you a red wine that my wife and I actually really enjoy, I'm almost embarrassed to tell you. It's a Pinot Noir. It's from Barefoot.
Okay.
And it's $9, sometimes $7. We get it on sale.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
But I mean, I wouldn't say it's the greatest wine I've ever had, but in terms of predictability,
you like it.
Predictability and knowing what I'm going to get.
See, never apologize for it because in fact, that is a wine that's produced on a very large scale.
Okay,
but it's produced on a large scale because people like it, and it's better to drink it than not to drink it, or be drinking Coca-Cola or Sprite or something with it's
absolutely.
That's why I led off with that premise. Always remember, it's about enjoyment. It's not about what other people think. It's about what you are enjoying and sharing with your loved ones and your friends. And then if you want to go over and see something else, you might pay a little extra for this one. You like that,
Sure,
so,
absolutely.
And it's just a matter of discovering it. And, it gets back to, again, I enjoy writing the column because I always give positive recommendations. I decided when I started writing the column never to say anything negative about any wine or any producer. I'm not a critic. I'm more like, hey, Eric, here's something, recommendations, like friend recommending. And that's how I do it. And I've always done that. And it seems to work pretty well. And people say, they've read my column and they enjoy it. And to me, that's just great.
Sure.
And it also gives me then an opportunity to travel and to meet winemakers. And to me, there's nothing better than that. And I've branched out now, and I do a couple times a year, a couple tours, which is nice with people who, like to come along.
Sure.
And, I've had a lot of repeat people on these tours. Like we're going to do one in end of September, early October to northern Italy, which I love those wines. I just wrote about it, but we're going to go to Milan and Lake Garda, Lake Como, and Bolzano.
Okay.
We're going to have a blast, and it's all unpretentious, just for fun of it.
Right.
And so you can tell I like to have fun with both my writing.
What's wrong with that?
Yeah, and and with a little bit of alcohol, that sort of lubricates a little bit.
Absolutely right.
All right, so let's see. What are we going on to here? Okay, so now this is a good lead into this next one, I hope. And I really love good wines from anywhere, but French wines, for the most part, for me personally, is something I like their style. And
why, Dave?
Well, because I think this guy kind of sums it up. Jacques Puisset, who is the founder of he calls it the Institut de Goût, which means the Institute of Taste. And he said, We want wines that have the face of the place where they were born and the guts of the people who made them.
That's a good statement.
I mean, that's the French traditionally way of doing it. Independent grape growers, they actually work in the vineyard, and they have this French concept, they call it terroir, which means it's the specifics of the place in terms of the climate, the soil, the grape variety, the traditions of what they do. And that is something that traditionally is how they inform the way they make wines. Now, they've changed too. They've caught on to doing kind of industrialized wines, and there's a lot of, and there has been over the years a lot of pretty cheap wine coming out of France.
Well, let me ask you a question about one particular brand.
Yeah.
It's my favorite wine.
Okay.
And I'm probably going to pronounce it incorrectly. Is it Louis Jadot?
Louis Jadot, yes.
And I cannot pronounce the wine. It begins with a B, and it's Bourgeois or something like that, or Bourgeois, or I can't pronounce.
Beaujolais?
Is it Beaujolais? Is that what it is?
I don't know. Louis Jadot is a.
It's Beaujolais. There you go.
Is a negociant and also an estate grower. So a negociant, what they do is they go around to small independent growers, buy their fruit. Mm-hmm. Put it all together, blend it together, and then they bottle the wines for a brand. In this case, Louis Jadot.
Okay.
And there are others like Joseph Drouin and a host of others. And they make some pretty good wines, although their estate wines can be very distinctive. So if you're a negociant, what you're trying to do is make wines that reflect a particular style, Beaujolais or Burgundy, but not necessarily real distinctive. They're trying to make a wine that is going to be predictable from vintage to vintage.
Got it.
Good for the price. There's nothing wrong with that. I mean, that's it's good to have standard wines like that. Like, for example, I like Louis Jadot's Bourgogne Rouge, which is made from the Pinot Noir grape, as opposed to the Beaujolais, which is made from the Gamay grape.
Okay.
So you like Louis Jadot Beaujolais, Gamay grape? Okay, well, this next wine, man, it's almost like we planned this, but
that's when I recognized the label when you came. I thought that's what, the other one that you have over there.
It's a Gamay. Gamay's the grape, which is the same grape from Beaujolais.
All right.
But this is from the Loire Valley, and this is from a producer, it's new to me, Domaine La Haute Noël, like Christmas, Noel, Okay, so I'm going to open this one up. But I'm hoping...
It's like Christmas over here.
I'm hoping that this is a wine that it's from the Loire Valley, which is about an hour and a half south of Paris, to orient people. And the Loire River is the longest river in France. It starts in the middle of France, flows north, and then goes from the west to the east and ends up in Nantes, where they have a lot of good seafood and that sort of thing. But in the middle part of the Loire, they have red wines from Gamay, Cabernet Franc, that sort of thing. So, and another thing about this is interesting. This falls more into the appreciation, but it's a tip that I tell people to be aware of. If you ever look at the front label, they have something to kind of catch your attention, a catchy label like this one.
Sure.
But if you look on the back, the importer, you can start getting a kind of a list in your mind of importers who you like, who have wines that are, of a style that you like. And this one is called Sakurnik. And Sakurnik is definitely, it's Skurnik. And whenever I see that, I'm thinking like, I might not know this wine, but I'll try it because I've had other wines that Sakurnik has imported. And, here locally, we have a importer called Gateway Wines and Spirits, which is definitely a really good one. And so Kermit Lynch, who I'm going to talk about in a little bit, is another one. So let's open this one up, Eric. Let's see. Now this one, I got to resort to the corkscrew. 2018 vintage, a Gamay from the Loire Valley. So we're going to see if this reflects the face of the place where it was born and the guts of the people who made it.
It's a powerful statement.
Yeah, it is. Okay, let's see here. Okay, get your glass there. Nice color.
generally red's my thing.
Me too.
I enjoy
I like
reds.
whites, but I like reds a lot.
Wonderful. Thank you, sir.
You're welcome. Cheers.
Salute.
Yes, sir.
Salute.
Now, to me, I learned this at the American Wine Society, but the first thing that you should appreciate about a wine is the color. And to me, that's just such a charming color. It's not heavy and ponderous. And look how that glints in the light, and just how, to me, that's beautiful. I can, looking over there, it's so nice, no cloudiness to it, which isn't a fault per se, but it looks very.
It wouldn't be a fault then, because I've actually seen cloudy wine. I always wondered, is that a?
It can be, but not necessarily.
Okay.
Sometimes if a wine, before it's bottled, if it's not filtered, it can have a little bit of cloudiness in it, which is actually can be a good thing. But if this wine looks like they probably filtered it to get a nice clear color, but it's a question of how heavy you filter it. If you filter something too heavily before you bottle it, you won't take any risk because you won't have any problems in the color.
Understood.
But you can strip out all the fruit.
Got it.
But like you said, you smell fruit on this one.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I'm gonna taste it.
They're very fruity.
Oh yeah.
Oh, that's excellent.
Isn't that nice? See, now
that actually finishes better than the Beaujolais.
Yeah, I was just thinking the same thing, that has a nice, it's not a long finish, but it has a nice, smooth, fine finish. To me, that's like biting into a raspberry, a nice, firm raspberry, or, a black cherry or something, and has that fresh, acidity to it, freshness, and, to me, this does kind of embody that. It does have, you could just see the vines where they were grown maybe next to Loire, and it has some guts. It does have some guts. Be great on the deck, on the patio. Oh man, that's really good.
That is good.
I picked a good.
You picked a great one.
Yeah. Now again, gets down to, and let's see what's the alcohol in this one. 12%. Which is good, not too high in alcohol. And I think the Gruner was low in alcohol as well, 12%. See, I don't necessarily, one of the problems sometimes with a lot of California wines is it's the climate is so nice there, so warm and sunny, that you get wines that are 13, 14, 15, 15.5%. Too much alcohol.
Wow.
12%.
Didn't know that.
Absolutely. I mean, that's another tip. If you want to, you should always look to see what the alcohol percentage is. This is 12%. By law, they have to put on the label the percent of alcohol by volume.
Right.
Because to me, I mean, if it's fine if you like a wine that has 15% alcohol, but to me, if you're going to sit down and drink a wine either before a meal or with your meal, I don't want to have too much alcohol. It goes back to that balance again. You want to have fruit, you want to have freshness, you want to have some tannins, and alcohol is another element that should be in proper balance with everything else. Okay. And so this is nice, but on the price again, what do you think on the price on this one?
Well, I paid 26-ish to 30-ish for the Beaujolais. I'm guessing the same size bottle. I'd pay more for that.
No, this one's $13.99.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So
wow. Your point is proven.
Yeah. The value is sharing it and about that no one's ever going to, if you bring a bottle of this and put it down Domaine Le Haute Noël Gamay from Loire, no one's heard of this wine, but it's as good as anything in terms of enjoying it for the moment with a meal, and that to me is the whole point of it should be about wine, enjoying it. Wow. So okay, so I want to get on to a couple others here because Burgundy is something that I mentioned to you is just north of Beaujolais, but it really proves this point of terroir and diversity. There's no place more diverse than Burgundy, and it's about I'd say 2 hours southeast from Paris. It starts near Chablis. Everyone's heard of Chablis in the northern part of Burgundy, and goes down all the way past the Côte d'Or, which is the most famous part, and then down to the Macon. And you have thousands of producers, lots of different styles, and it's lots of fun. And my friend Bob Culligan, we used to have and we still do have he's not in it anymore, but every Tuesday a Burgundy lunch. Hard duty, I can't always go because I'm working on some other things. There, but he always said, always approach tasting Burgundy wines with humility, and then expect to be humbled. Which,
wow,
I always thought was very good because, and by that he's meaning that we usually try these wines in blind tastings where you have them, wrapped and you don't know what they are in advance, just to keep you honest. And it's amazing how. You might think you have something nailed, and you're totally on the wrong track, which I like. I mean, that's the thing about Burgundy. It doesn't necessarily traditionally pride itself on predictability, other than the grapes used. Like, it's not, there's either Pinot Noir or Chardonnay. Chardonnay for the white, Pinot Noir. And then you also have some subsidiary grapes like Aligoté and Gamay, but they're very not predominant like Chardonnay and Pinot Noir. So you pretty much know what your grape varieties are, but the diversity of styles, the effects of the vintage. For if I were to recommend a place more so than any other for kind of diving in and having fun, it's Burgundy for diverse offerings. Also Northern Italy, I think, as well. But that, I think, was a good one to talk about. And then Italian wines, this is an interesting one. We always heard of the old Chianti in the flask, right? Like where you stick the candle in it. Somebody said no wine could possibly be a good wine where you can stick a candle in it, and they don't do that much anymore. I think we're probably dating ourselves. There used to be a saying that the Italians export their cheap wines and keep their best wines to drink at home.
That I actually believe.
And that used to be pretty much the case, because they didn't have enough of the good wines. If you're looking at Europe, you have to keep in mind there were 2 world wars which devastated those places. And before the First World War, there was something called phylloxera, which was this little mite in the ground that practically destroyed their all their vines. And the only way they saved their vines was, and this still galls the French quite a bit, some guy figured out if they brought, because the phylloxera mite came from the New World, and they figured out if they grafted their vines onto American rootstocks, where the mites are in the ground, the rootstocks, American rootstocks, would resist the phylloxera and allow them to have a rebirth there. So that's true. And so all these European, most all of them are on American rootstocks now. But that was devastating. And then you had World War I, where millions of people were killed. It really took a toll on the labor available to create wines. And then World War II also had a devastating effect. And so in Italy, after the war, they were just on their knees economically, and they were just churning out anything they could. Although they all had these, vineyards that they were highly prized, and they still made wines, and they kept a lot of them back, but the general impression was of cheap wine from Italy. But my point is about saying this about Italian wines is you can get a lot of good bargains there now of good quality wines. It's not just because a wine is inexpensive from Italy. And I just wrote an article about northern Italian red wines from the Piedmonte region, and I've discovered 5 or 6 bottles for $13.99 or so, which were really, really good. And so I don't think it's any longer the truth that they export their cheap wines and keep their good stuff at home. They've upped their game quite a bit.
What was it? Was it Chianti that we had as kids growing up? That was from my Italian side, but it was very fruity, right? Is that correct?
It should be fruity.
Yeah, very fruity. Too fruity for me. I mean, it was just very, very sweet.
Generally not too sweet, though.
Okay,
so it may not have been Chianti.
It might not have been. Is there another Italian wine that's...
Well, you have some Moscato wines, but those are generally white wines, and those are sweet.
Probably was cheap Chianti.
But I'll tell you, a wine that was off dry, and sold literally millions of cases. Most of it in Western Pennsylvania. Was Riuniti.
Oh my gosh!
Remember that?
Oh my gosh!
Riuniti Lambrusco.
Oh my gosh!
That was a sweet red
70s,
wine.
early 80s.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that was one that you might be thinking about.
Riuniti on the commercials.
Riuniti on ice. That's nice.
Nice. Yes.
They still make it, and Lambrusco is. They make them in a dry style as well, and. Interestingly, recently, and I should have brought this, I forgot to do it, but there's a Lambrusco, dry Lambrusco, red dry Lambrusco, like they like to drink in Emilia Romagna, which is, you have Parma, Bologna, Modena, which is the so-called breadbasket of Italy. They have the prosciutto di Parma hams. They have the Parmesan Reggiano cheese, which is magnificent. The aged balsamic vinegar, Oh my God, that
huge
place
fan
is
of that.
Just great. And what they like to drink there is this dry Lambrusco. Some of it even bubbling, with a little bit of fizz in it. Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
And so now I found one in a can.
All right.
It's called Frico. It has a picture of a pig on it, and it's a purple and silver can. And it's outstanding. I mean, it really is good, and it's dry red Lambrusco. So you can get that at the PLCB, or it's generally available. So
is there differences in Italy primarily? Being that that's my heritage, we share heritage there. Are there differences in wines between northern and southern?
Oh yeah, tremendous. I mean, even more so than France. Italy has just a mind-boggling variety of grape varieties, places where they grow it, names. I mean, you could study in a lifetime and not get a handle on that. So,
is there Sicilian wine?
Yeah, absolutely.
The reason being is I remember as a child having some and not a young adult. Not caring for it at all.
Well, I think this goes to the point about them. They've actually, in Italy in general, picked up their game. There's a tremendous number of really good, reasonably priced Sicilian wines now, made from grapes like Nero d'Avola. So you should give them another shot, And my grandfather on my father's side came from Calabria, and I've had the good opportunity to visit there. I don't know if you know Sam Patty. He's the owner of La Prima Espresso Company.
The name's familiar.
Great guy. We partner on doing these trips to Italy, and we did one to Calabria. In any event, there are lots of wines there that you still don't even see in this country. You can only really get them there, and. They drink them by the pitcher. They just and pour them literally out of a pitcher, and you can get. They used to say there that wine was a lot less expensive than milk in Italy, and I think it's still true.
Probably
because they produce so much wine, and a lot of it can be pretty good, but you have to figure out what you're doing there, and I would say generally, if I was gonna, you asked about north versus south, generally they tend to have maybe a little less alcohol in the north than they do in the south, because the southern part is really warm. Although there are exceptions to that, like the Alto Adige, where we're going to take this tour, this group in September. It's actually one of the warmest parts after Sicily, because if you think of Italy, it's the peninsula with the boot, so-called boot in the heel. All the heat goes up the peninsula up to the northernmost part where Alto Adige is located, above Lake Garda, Trentino, and Venice. And there are the Dolomite Mountains. And it creates this bowl. And the heat is captured there. So they can make some really good, big red wines. And then on the mountainsides, they grow the grapes for the white wines. So, yeah, Italy's a lot of fun. I mean, I would be remiss if I didn't mention it, my background.
Absolutely.
It's one of my favorites.
What country? What's the biggest wine growing country? I guess I should wine making country in the world. Is it America?
No,
because we seem to think. Yeah, absolutely. We seem to think we're obviously the number one of everything. But obviously, I would think France would still be a major producer. Is that correct?
If I'm not mistaken, and I could be mistaken, but I believe 1 and 2 are Spain, then Italy, then France, and I'm not sure where the U.S. lines up because other than we're making more wine these days, but primarily you still have it on the West Coast, and although there is wine made in every state in the Union, if you can believe that.
I can't believe
commercial
that.
wine
Really?
in even Minnesota. I don't know how the
How's
hell
it
they do it,
Minnesota?
but it's true they do. They grow grapes there and they make it. So,
and you obviously travel to Napa.
Yeah.
What's your thought? What's your general thought of Napa Valley wines?
Napa Valley, as opposed to Sonoma Valley, as opposed to Anderson Valley, as opposed to
Napa.
I mean, how can you not like Napa Valley? You know, I mean, I think that one thing I would say generally is the wines have become somewhat overpriced as their fame has grown. You know, that was back in the day. You had Italian immigrants who came there who bought these wineries, which actually had been founded back in the 1800s. They were famous the world over in the 1800s because you had Europeans go to the Napa Valley, and they recognized that the growing conditions there were such that you could grow most anything. The problem was then a little thing called prohibition. And you couldn't,
blip in history, right?
That was a big problem. You couldn't grow, you couldn't make commercial wines anymore in Napa Valley, and a lot of the wineries went out of business, and they became basically shells of themselves. Some people survived, like you had the Pedroncellis. They're actually in up in Sonoma County. You had the Mondavis. You had some people who did survive it. But
is that Mogan David?
What's that?
The Mondavi. That's a different than Mogan David, right?
Yeah. Mogan David.
They're more of an importer, was it?
Mogan David was I think, was a brand that maybe the Gallo family had. But I'm not sure
more
about
commercial,
that.
More of a
sweet red wine. Yeah. But the guy who really got Napa Valley going and put it back on the map was Robert Mondavi. Up until that time, they were making, basically jug wines, some pretty good wines too. But they didn't have the reputation. And Robert Mondavi decided he thought that Napa could make wines on a class with the best wines of Bordeaux, world-class wines. So he made it his personal mission, and he paid a price for it because he split with his family and had a very acrimonious split with his brother.
Like a story there.
There's a story. Yeah, he wrote an autobiography. He passed away a few years ago, but and then he basically proselytized around the world, around the country, and he did put Napa on the map. But there was another thing that really helped Napa, which you may have heard of, Eric. It was called the Judgment of Paris. Have you ever heard of that?
I have not.
There was a British wine merchant by the name of Stephen Spurrier. And he decided that he liked California Napa wines in particular very much. So what he did was he went over and got some wines, picked up some wines from Stag's Leap Cellars, wine cellars, Stag's Leap wine cellars, from Chateau Montelena, and some others. And then he went over to France and he put them in a blind tasting again with some of the top Bordeaux wines, some of the top Burgundy wines, and he got these French, prominent French wine industry people to taste them blind.
Okay.
And lo and behold, when they came out for rating them, the California wines won in terms of being the highest. Yeah, and that was the so-called Judgment of Paris.
Got it.
Once that happened, Napa just really took off.
Sure.
Mondavi, I don't think had any wines in that one. That was kind of like, if you weren't in the Judgment of Paris, it was like a musician missing Woodstock.
Understood.
You know?
Yeah.
No one really knew Woodstock.
What year was that again?
That was 76, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think there was a movie made about that.
Yeah, there was. It was called Bottle Shock.
Right.
With Alan Rickman.
Right. I love him.
That's another good movie.
I love him.
Oh, yeah, he was great. May he rest in peace. Yeah.
Right. I love him.
Yeah, and also you had the guy who was Dennis Ferrantino was a supporting actor in that one. It was good. Yeah, he was the guy who was hanging out. You saw Bottle Shock?
I saw it, yeah.
They're hanging out in Paris, you know. And I've met Steven Spurrier. He couldn't be anything more different from Alan Rickman.
And how they portrayed him.
But here's the thing. Steven Spurrier was friends. They're both British. And I saw Steven at this wine writers conference in Napa, of all places, in Meadowood about 2 years ago. And so I asked him about it. I said, what'd you think of that movie Bottle Shock? He says, well, I didn't like it. He said, because they weren't going to present it in all the factual details. And Alan called me up. He knew Alan. He said, and he told me he was going to do this. And I asked him not to do it. And he says, well, I'm going to do it anyway. But I just wanted to give you as a courtesy that I'm going to do it. And he says, Steven Spurrier, he said, and I went to my wife and I said, I can't believe they're doing this. I'm going to take them on. And she said to me, Steven, Alan Rickman is going to portray you in a Hollywood movie. You should shut up. And so he did. But that's a true story. He said that.
Wow.
Because he used to drink with Alan Rickman, you know.
Wow.
But Alan Rickman's nothing like Steven Spurrier, you know.
Right. So was that an odd casting then?
It was odd, but it sort of captured the spirit of it. That
got it.
You know, because
I enjoyed the movie.
Oh yeah, it was a good
niche movie, but I really enjoyed it.
Steven is. He's kind of like he's kind of a retiring guy, you know, but it helped make his career too.
Sure,
put him on the map.
Without
and
a
he's
doubt.
Still known for that, and they always welcome him back to Napa because he has a very knowledgeable palate about California wines, and it took chutzpah to bring California wines to France.
Incredible.
And no one. It would have been like. The Jets beating the Colts in that Super Bowl.
Absolutely.
No one gave them a shot, you know?
Right.
But they did. And it was like, and you couldn't argue because it was the most reputable, palate, so to speak, of a French
they were just so appalled.
Well, they were shocked. And in fact, they were criticized in France for having done that, you know, and calling a spade a spade. But,
right.
So, you know, fast forward now, I mean, I love visiting Napa. I mean, there's a lot of that kind of, we talked about earlier, some people with more money than brains, you know, like they have money. If you have money and you want to buy in, if you buy an estate in Napa, you're kind of buying, credibility.
Sure.
I mean, and I mean, there's people throwing tens of millions into hundreds of millions. Like the guy who, Warren Winarski, whose wine, Stag's Leap Wine Cellars, was picked the #1 red in the Paris of Judgment tasting. He makes some good wines, obviously, but and he started from scratch. He had been a mathematician in Chicago.
Okay.
He went out to California. He was a home winemaker in the American Wine Society. He went to work for Robert Mondavi as an assistant winemaker, just slopping, cleaning the floors, doing anything he could just to get in the business. And he ended up then going at that time to what was considered a, on the other side of the tracks, part of Napa Valley, on the other side of the Silverado Trail, and he bought this vineyard.
Right.
But when his wine won in the Judgment of Paris, he became famous.
Sure.
And 30 years afterwards, he sold Stag's Leap Wine Cellars for like $150 million.
Oh my gosh!
Yeah, that's an amazing story. And that's
without a doubt.
But money is can be corrupting influence too. It's
sure.
like,
sure.
So you can't really buy Napa reds for reasonable prices. So I like Napa wines. I always feel good when I visit there because it's Northern California. It's beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
But it's kind of like a little bit of a hustle. The amount of money is kind of makes me wonder sometimes, and the prices of the wines are high, But now, just north of that, you have Sonoma County, and just over the mountains, and like the one I told you about earlier, Justin Meyer, he is in Sonoma County, Alexander Valley, which has become also considered top tier, but it's still not quite as sometimes when I'm in Napa, it seems like, it's like Disneyland in a way. You got a train with people coming up the train, and the tasting rooms, and you got to pay top bucks to go to these tasting rooms.
Right.
Sonoma County, you can still go, and it's a little more laid back.
Sure.
And in Sonoma County, you have the Dry Creek Valley, which is one of my favorites for Zinfandels. I love good red Zinfandels. They're not like the Schiamme. They're more robust. Those that are not too alcoholic. Again, the balance. I think balance is the key to quality of any enjoyment.
Is that a pink wine?
No. That is, you're thinking of white Zinfandel.
Okay.
That's very popular, and it's kind of a sweeter wine. But true Zinfandel is a red wine, and in the Dry Creek Valley, after early 20th century, 1900s, you had a lot of people emigrating from Italy to the Dry Creek Valley.
Okay.
And again, there was nothing. Basically, they had been growing grapes there, but it had really fallen on hard times. And these Italians came in, and like the Pedroncellis, the Raffinellis, the I'm trying to think of some of the others, Martinellis, others.
So you see a pattern there?
Yeah, and they bought this land, and they now 2-3 generations later, they've come into their own.
Sure.
Because they make some fantastic that if you like true red Zinfandel, and to me that is the iconic American grape, Zinfandel.
Okay.
Because it's great with barbecue, and as long as it doesn't have a lot of alcohol.
Okay.
And one of my favorites is the Pedroncelli family, and they have a vineyard they call Mother Clone, which is the old vines. You're talking like 80, 90 years old, and just fantastic wines because they do have alcohol, but they're not over the top.
Sure.
And you can still buy them for $25,
reasonable,
$20. They're not. A Zinfandel, red Zinfandel from Napa is going to be $30, $40, $50. So, and then, you go beyond that, you have the Anderson Valley, which is up in Mendocino County, further north from Sonoma. Right. And they're also famous. They were pioneers in the cultivating the hemp plant quite a bit. That was absolutely
it's Northern California.
And now they're on the cutting edge because it's become legalized. And
absolutely.
That's one of the biggest growing areas in the wine industry is green wines, where they're somehow blending CBD into wines. It's coming.
That's a thing?
Absolutely. We haven't seen it in Pennsylvania yet, but it's in California. It's a big deal.
Really?
Yeah. In fact, get this: you can go to Mendocino. You can go to places where they grow the marijuana and the wine, and you can have a wine tasting and a marijuana tasting, which is crazy. And my daughter said to me when I said that, she said, Dad, you should never do that. And I was like, don't worry about it. She said she called that cross something or other.
Cross pollination.
So no cross. I don't know what it is, but I wanted to do a website. I thought it probably would have been good. And somebody I think got it already. Weed and wine.
Weed and wine. Yeah.
I mean, it's coming. Because. To me, I don't know how you would do it. To me, this is such a pleasant thing. Yeah, it has alcohol. Why put anything else in it? But again, there's demand for it.
Is going in everything now.
Yeah,
it's just
yeah. It doesn't have the THC, which gets you high.
Right.
So I don't know. I mean, I know that Constellation Brands, which is the biggest wine producer, maybe second, they go neck and neck with Gallo.
Mm-hmm.
They sold a lot of their iconic wine brands in order to go big into the CBD and legalized marijuana industry.
I'm not surprised.
It's coming.
Green wines.
Yeah, and I mean, it's taxation. It's like gambling. It's like anything else.
Without a doubt.
Yeah.
Did you in your travels, have you ever heard of 100 Acres Vineyard? Does that ring a bell at all?
Mm-mm.
I had a musician about 10 years ago was in love with this. He was ordering, wealthy musician. He was ordering wine by the case there. So he brought a couple cases out on the road, and when he was in Pittsburgh, we sat after the show, and I was really taken back by how good I want to say it was a Pinot Noir.
From California.
Yeah. And I don't know if it's Napa. Could be Sonoma. I'm not sure.
Mm-hmm.
But I was taken back by that, and I couldn't buy it around here. So that was where I was going with this question. So in Pennsylvania, obviously, we have state stores. You have the Pennsylvania Liquor Control Board. That's kind of going away in a lot of states, right? The state control of wine sales, and beer for that matter, has been turned over to private sector.
Well, there's only 2 jurisdictions that have complete control, and Pennsylvania is changing. It's Pennsylvania and I think Utah.
Okay. Okay. So the Quaker state and obviously the Mormon state,
right.
The reason I asked that question is I tried to seek out 100 Acre for the last 10 years here, and I haven't been able to get anyone at the
PLCB.
To be able to order it for me.
Mm-hmm.
So you've obviously done this for so long. You've seen the change in availability and being able to ship wine from state to state. Do you think we're going to see in this state possibly the opportunity to buy wine and theoretically really buy wine unencumbered completely and have it shipped in?
In other words,
on demand?
Total privatization.
Yeah.
Probably unlikely, because the Pennsylvania Liquor Control Board has actually improved their selection significantantly.
No question.
Yeah.
No question.
And it's actually pretty good now, and the prices aren't bad. I mean, these 2 wines I bought.
That's amazing.
I mean, $12.99 and $13.99. I mean, you can get some really outstanding values there. And as a practical matter, I think that almost every retailer will ship into Pennsylvania.
Okay.
If you look on their website, they usually say, if you want us to ship to you, you are authorizing us to. You're taking title in our jurisdiction, and you're authorizing us to ship. And if we're violating any laws, it's on you. It's not on us.
Right.
But
has that changed over the last couple of years?
Yeah, it's changed
a couple of years ago. I couldn't bring it in.
Well,
that way.
if you put 100 acre. I turned off my phone, but if you put 100 acre vineyard into this is a really cool app, Eric. It's called winesearcher.com.
Okay.
Winesearcher.com.
Straight ahead.
You put in 100 acres vineyard. It'll show you every retail store in the U.S. and worldwide that sells that wine.
Wow.
And then you just click on it and you go to their website and they'll probably ship it.
That's to be good for the industry.
Yeah, winesearcher.com. Yeah, that's it's a good app. Very good app, winesearcher.com. I use it all the time.
Okay.
Yeah, and they'll ship wine. I mean, I think there's some California. Some French wines that you don't necessarily get in Pennsylvania. But the music industry. There's a lot of musicians who've gone into the wine business.
I'm aware.
I think it was the Doobie Brothers. They had what's the name of their winery? It's right there in Sonoma. This is horrible because I met the son. I can't remember now, but you know, and
I think they're one of the first. I think
they may have been. Yeah, I'm trying to think what other musicians. A lot of actors have, like Fred McMurray.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
The guy who played Perry Mason. What was his name?
Raymond Burr.
Raymond Burr. He was in Dry Creek.
Right.
You know, and then professional athletes like Greg Norman.
Oh, yeah.
You know. And then more recently, the Shark.
Yeah, no, that's why he's Australian. Is
Australian.
Is his wineries, his vineyards in Australia?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. You've had, you know, people from the rap industry have been going in and, you know, caused quite a stir because I forget the gentleman's name, but he did a video or something. He was drinking this really well-known one of these wines that. Getting to the point where it's so expensive, you got to wonder whether it's worth buying. But he was drinking a $1,500 bottle of Dujac Chambertin, you know. And it's like that stuff's pretty good, you know. And it's like, yeah, and you know, it's like, yeah. Well, but I mean, you know, I don't know. The practical utility of that is limited.
Well, I think music artists have been, whether it's been artists going to Mexico and opening up tequila factories. That's been going on for like Sammy Hagar.
Sammy Hagar,
that's the top of my head. There's been a lot of hard rock acts, believe it or not. Now again, I don't know if they're owning their own vineyards or they're invested. They could be just rebranding things.
Yeah, usually it's...
and beer the same way.
Yeah, they take their name and they, put it on... I'm not going to say generic, but you know, a lot of times it's generic.
Sure, it is.
You know, like, but not always. Like Raymond Burr had vineyards.
Right.
Mario Andretti, you know, being a good race car driver, he bought some vineyards out there. I'm trying to think if Mike Ditka has a wine. I don't know.
I wouldn't be surprised. It was Ditka's restaurants for a while. There wasn't. I think there was Ditka's wines being served in the Ditka's restaurant.
Yeah, so it probably was Mike Ditka. You know, I mean, what the heck? Viva Las Vegas. I mean, people want to do it. There's a lot of wines, and it gets back to that premise about if you like it or not. You know?
Right, and it takes some of the unpretentiousness out of it as well, too.
Yeah, I'm a big believer in that. I mean, you know, wine should be for sharing, for enjoyment, and sharing knowledge. Music's the same way.
Absolutely.
You know? I mean, it's one of those things that, you know, it's a pull through life. You know, it pulls you through.
No question. And my other question to you is, why do you think that? So you open up an upscale restaurant, and I know there's a certain accoutrements you need to have an upscale restaurant. I get that. And oftentimes the wine list is as long as the menu. The menu might be on one side, and the wine list is just as long.
Right.
And there's a pretentiousness to that. And granted, I'm sure it's upscale and you're charging a certain amount of money, but really it doesn't. People are intimidated. The average person going to that restaurant, even if it's a regular to some degree, still may be intimidated because they, number one, probably can't understand how to pronounce half the wine is there. Or that they assume, like we tend to do in this country, assume that because something's more expensive, it must be the best.
Right.
Which is, like you said, it's a terrible way to approach wine.
Mm-hmm. So what's the question?
The question is, you wonder why that continues to be a trend. You can't demystify it. There's no demystification of I want to sell as much wine as I could if I was a restaurant. Right?
Well, you're talking to a guy who I actually one of the hats I wore was I owned a restaurant for 3 years.
Okay.
Which was insane, but you know, I mean,
and you survived. You lived to tell a tale,
and my wife, more importantly, didn't leave me. I actually had the premise. We sold a lot of wine, and that wasn't the problem. But my whole premise was to have a very not a simplistic wine list, but one that was easily comprehended. Like what I would do is. I categorized it by the style of the wine, like light and fruity, or medium body, or heavy. You know, same with the whites. And
so you did demystify it for a bit for the
clients.
Little bit,
yeah. But I'm not a big believer in demystifying. Mystery's a good thing.
Okay.
But what it should be is it should be accessible without eliminating the mystery or without eliminating the romance. See, mystery and romance go hand in hand to me.
Agreed.
Or, not knowing something and making the effort to get to know it.
Okay.
That kind of is a good thing. And that's why, it shouldn't be something that you're ever going to think that you can eliminate the mystery or the romance because for me then it's boring. That's just another beverage. Wine should not be just another beverage. It should have a little aura of
it's kind of sold that way, I think, though. In restaurants in general.
Well,
I think,
yes and no. Yeah, in restaurants, yeah. But the demystification thing sort of gets to this area where you take generic wine and you put a different animal on it and a different cover label.
I understand.
And then it becomes just like, boom, boom, boom. How many units are you selling?
Right.
Boring. To me, that's
very boring.
Yeah. Some people like that. But to me, I always chose wines on my wine list when we had the restaurant where you had an individual behind it and that the seller could, our server could tell the story about the wine. And that was always good, and people kind of like that. And, and we would not, overcharge. I mean, I think we did usually 1.5 to 2 times.
Sure.
That's another pet peeve. If I know when I go to a wine list, I know the prices of wines. If somebody's charging 3 or 4 times,
right,
that's not right. It shouldn't be that way.
Right.
There's a lot of there's places that have I think pretty good wine lists and up their game. Here locally, like I like going to Bar Marco. Have you been there? Yeah, in the Strip. I think they do a very nice job. I like to go to places that or bring your own bottle too.
Right.
For me that's fun. To bring a bottle like this.
That's a trend too. I think it's coming back.
I mean, if they charge me $15 or $20,
service,
I'm happy to do that. Because they got to make some money.
Absolutely.
But there's a lot of good places they'll bring your own bottle, and even if they have a wine list, if you call ahead, which I recommend you do as a courtesy, let them know whether they're willing to do it or not. Right. But there are other places that they won't let you do it. Like I went to a place in Lawrenceville the other night, and I was like, I just assumed I could, I shouldn't have done it. It wasn't a fancy place, but they'd have a liquor license.
Sure.
I was willing to pay $20 or $25, and they said, "No, we're not going to let you do that." And so,
interesting.
So I drank water instead, and they could have had another $25 in revenue.
Right. Right.
Dumb.
But what I loved in the years I was traveling was that there was wine bars, good wine bars in other states. Mm-hmm. Chicago, I spent a lot of time in Chicago. Fabulous wine bars. Upstate New York City. Miami, Florida. Their wine bars were a thing. Mm-hmm. I don't feel that here in Pittsburgh.
It's. I mean, it is happening.
Okay.
I mean, I know what you mean, though. Yeah, I mean, because, I'm not sure how it works. Because when I had the restaurant, you couldn't do this. You may be able to do it now, where if somebody comes in, can they buy a bottle of wine cash and carry? Like most of those places, jurisdictions that had wine bars, if you tried a glass and you liked it, you could buy a bottle and take it home.
Absolutely.
Whereas I'm still not sure, what the law is on
the legality
of
it.
Yeah, and it's silly that it's so complicated that they make it difficult.
Right.
But I agree. I mean, one of the things I like to do when I go to Italy or to France or go to wine bars, and there's so many of them, and every place you go,
I can't imagine.
And they're not necessarily overpriced.
Okay.
I don't like going to a place where if it's by the glass, it's too expensive.
Sure.
I'm trying to think. I went to a place here locally recently. I'm not going to badmouth anybody, but I was looking at the prices by glass, and I'm thinking, like, geez, come on, I mean, what are you doing here? I mean, I don't mind paying a little something, but don't, don't insult my intelligence.
How about this is a question I can't let you leave without getting clarification on. So. One of the loves of my childhood was my grandmother, and she drank port wine.
Port wine, okay.
Every night, forever, and she lived to a robust 95.
Nice.
You'll laugh, though, because she wasn't real ultra particular unless she was out. If she was home, she was drinking a brand, I want to say it was King's, and I used to go to the state store, and they'd have it waiting for me, and I'd bring it to her, and it was these big gallons.
Right.
I remember trying it with her one night and just being, oh my gosh, it was like drinking, I don't know, like Kool-Aid without the water in it. It was just so
really rich and sweet.
So what is traditionally? How did port wine come about? Is I was always told it was the bottom sludge of the barrel. Was there any truth to that?
No.
But it certainly is a different kind. Dessert wine, is that the same kind of thing?
Yeah. It is a dessert wine. I mean, it's port wine is what's called a fortified wine.
Okay.
And what they do is they add neutral grape spirits to the wine before it's done fermenting. Okay, so and then that has two results. One is it raises the alcohol level generally in port wines to 20% alcohol
I didn't know that.
by volume. Yeah.
Okay.
19-20%.
That might explain some things.
And what fermentation does is it converts sugar into alcohol and CO2, which escapes. But if you put neutral spirits into a fermenting, a bunch of grapes, it ends the fermentation. So if there's some residual sweetness, so ports usually have, I forget the exact amount, but 3 or 4% residual sugar and 20% alcohol.
Okay.
So, and they're very rich and concentrated. And, I like them with cheese and walnuts. It's a dessert in and of itself, basically.
Yes. It's sweet.
Absolutely.
Very sweet.
Yeah, sweet. And another one is Madeira, which is a fortified wine. And fortified wines they're made all over the world, and it's a whole separate category.
Okay.
The French call them vin du naturel. It's just it's a matter of taste. I mean, I don't drink a lot of fortified wines, but I do drink some. Like if I'm having blue cheese or something at the end of a meal, I might do that. Little taste of that.
Very strong, I remember.
Yeah, I mean they are, because of the alcohol.
Okay, so that's what it is then.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it seemed pretty sweet to me too, though.
Yeah,
it was just
absolutely.
To the palate, it was sweet.
Absolutely. So I got another bottle here, which I don't think we're going to open tonight. I just wanted to give to you, but
thank you.
It's one of my favorites. It's from the Southern Rhone. Now this is a blend of Grenache, Syrah, and Mourvedre from a village called Gigondas, and Michel Ferraud, a fille, which is his daughters. He has 3 daughters. And this is a wine with guts. I mean, definitely has the guts of the people who make it, and reflects the face of...
Well, thank you, sir.
You're welcome. My pleasure. Take that home and enjoy it.
I'm going to
have that with a steak or something.
What's wrong with that? Nothing wrong with that.
The other thing I wanted to mention was this book, because to me... if people tune in and hear this, I highly recommend reading Kermit Lynch's book, Adventures on the Wine Route, A Wine Buyer's Tour of France. It was written in 1988. And I would say I've read many, many, many books, probably over 100 or more about wine. And there's none that was more influential than this one, because it captures the spirit of winemaking, the adventure. It's an adventure. It should be an adventure.
Sure.
Wine should be an adventure. It's a beverage, but there's also a lot to be discovered there about culture, about different ways of doing things, diversity, if you only do it and not be intimidated by it. And this kind of got me started a little bit because I saw somebody who was in the industry who wrote something, and so I started writing after that in the early 90s. And I do have a blog called daveswinecellar.com.
daveswinecellar.com.
Yeah, which I write about different things, and you can have a newsletter that I send out once a month.
Yeah, I just read the latest one, as a matter of fact, before I came here. So I'm prepared, sir.
Yeah. So, it's fun. I try to keep it fun. And I have one last quote, which I think is a good one from my buddy Greg Goddles, who actually worked for Gateway Wines and Spirits, who imported that wine. He's not, he's retired now, but he said, nobody has the last word on wine. And it's always something to remember, no matter how much you know. Nobody has the last word on wine.
Got it.
It's true.
I believe it.
You know, you got to keep learning. It's like anything else. Music, right? You never.
Without
it's a journey, right?
Without a doubt. And I admire your passion for it, too.
Oh, I do have a passion for it.
There's no question that comes through.
Yeah, and the writing part of it. So I appreciate the opportunity tonight.
This has been outstanding.
Yeah, I hope you enjoyed the wine.
Oh, my gosh, yes. Yeah, we're going to, after we're all done here, we're not going to finish that bottle.
You bet.
Thank you, Dave.
My pleasure.
I appreciate it,
Thanks,
sir.
Eric.
Very much.
Thanks, buddy.
And thanks to all of you.
Thank you. Peace.